that particular model does not benefit them the most.
Right.
And I think something that we also, or some folks might discount, is by encouraging competition. Public schools are essentially government monopoly.
Yes.
All right. So by encouraging competition, you actually improve the public schools as well, because they have to compete with the private schools and with some of the other things that are the home schools, et cetera, some of the other things that are going on. So it's actually better for the entire education system, and you'll see the criticism is, oh, you're taking money away from public schools. No, we're making public schools better, actually. And we're giving families more ability to choose the best pathway for their young person.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the key is empowering families to make decisions, because who knows better and who's more self-interested to make the best decision for that child.
Exactly.
It really bothers me.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. Well, we're coming to you live from Nashville, Tennessee, as part of our celebrating America's 250th anniversary alongside AFP, Americans for Prosperity. And we've talked to a lot of really great guests, but I'm super excited for the guest that we have here. He's taken an odd road, a non-traditional road to elected office, but you might know him as Kane, the Hall of Fame WWE wrestler. Right now, though, we know him as the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, Mr. Glenn Jacobs. Mayor, we're so glad you joined us again, and really looking forward to talking to you.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, maybe can you tell folks a little bit about your pathway? You gained international fame as a professional wrestler, and then you end up being in elected office and seeking that and being in the political process. I know you're a big deal in Tennessee. So, can you talk to us a little bit about your career, and then how'd that lead to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm in Missouri. My family really didn't have a whole lot, and I'm a product of the American dream. I found something I was good at. I had played sports throughout high school and then through college. Looked like I was going to play in the NFL, play professional football. Hurt my knee very badly. That was pretty much the end of that. Then I just kind of fell into professional wrestling. It was something that I was naturally good at. Worked hard, and my life has been incredible. I've traveled the world, provided my family with a life that I wouldn't have thought possible. And when I think about that, I don't think that journey is possible anywhere but here in this country, because of the liberty and the freedom that we enjoy in this country to use our gifts to our benefit, but then also the benefit of the other people. And that's really why I got into politics. I'm a big believer in what Ronald Reagan said, that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. For someone like me who has been such a beneficiary of the freedom that we enjoy in America, it's inexcusable that I wouldn't do something. And for me, that something ended up getting into political office, which is not what I envisioned earlier in my life. I'd always been involved as far as I voted, and say history and social studies were my favorite subjects in school. So, and I guess I was kind of fascinated by all of it, but I never saw myself getting into it. But once you have a family and you realize it's not just about you, it's about other people, and what are my kids going to have? What are my grandkids going to have? What opportunities might not be available for them if the country in some respects keeps going down the road that we have been. Tennessee is a great state. I think it's the greatest state in the union. So I don't worry so much about that here. I think that what we can do in Tennessee is we can really be a beacon to the rest of the country that we do it right, and we are the land of opportunity. But that's really why I got into office.
Well, I'll tell you, as a lot of our viewers and listeners know, I live in the Chicago area in Illinois, so a lot of my neighbors and friends are moving here down.
Yeah, yes, trust me, we know it.
Hopefully, they don't bring their politics. Although you're actually getting the good ones.
We are, and we worry about that in Tennessee. Is folks coming here and changing our state. That's not what I see. And people that are coming here, I always say that they're political refugees, not missionaries. But on the opposite side of that is, my fear is some of these places that are already doing things what I would consider incorrectly. Yeah. They're losing all the folks that have common sense that, when I think of America, so the country's really becoming even more bifurcated,
it is.
In that respect.
It is. We kind of have two countries in that regard.
You almost do, yes.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about as you looked at when you decided to take that step to run for office. We talk a lot on this show, and I know at tonight's event we're talking about the One Small Step campaign. Like,
yes.
What is that step that people take to get engaged in the political process or public policy or their community's betterment? For you, was that while you were wrestling? Was it while you were doing something else? And is there something specific that moved you in that direction?
Yeah, it was while I was wrestling. As I said, I'd always been interested in government. And I think for me, like the one small step was better educating myself about everything. And wondering why things are like this. And then I would read, and I would look at many different perspectives though. All of us are on social media now. One of the dangers of social media is we only end up listening to the people who agree with us.
Yeah.
So we end up in an echo chamber. I'm glad that I didn't do that when I was kind of first exposed to some ideas that I would have never considered otherwise, because I was, setting my thinking, and then I realized, wait a second, these folks have a point. Or, wow, what I believe is right, and now I can see the arguments to the opposite of that, and they're wrong. And it also made me even more, I guess, more diehard in some areas of my political philosophy. But that was my first small step. If you'd asked me I was going to be a public official 20 years ago, I'd have said, you're insane. I never want to do that. But as I just got more and more into things, eventually that led into, supporting candidates and doing things like that, supporting certain causes that were very important to me. And for me, that was just literally like taking that small step until you get to the one big leap.
Yeah.
Of saying, I'm going to run for office.
Well, running for office is a big deal.
It is.
It really is one of the ultimate forms of putting yourself out there, and good and bad. And
yes.
I give a lot of credit. It's easy to, I think it's a pastime to kind of rip on and down talk elected officials as politicians and all. But, I've had a career working with politicians and working with elected officials, and I've met great ones and bad. I mean, I grew up in Illinois politics, so I've had a number of bosses go to jail. Yeah. So I get like there's good and bad, but I've also met some of the most wonderful, principled people I've ever met.
Yes.
Who are true leaders for good. What is, the founding fathers set up our system of government, a representative system. Now you really being a big part of it here in Tennessee, like, what are your reflections about serving in office and the responsibilities?
Back to your previous comment, it was a little easier for me than it probably is for a lot of folks because I was already in the public eye.
Yep.
Now, that can freak you out when all of a sudden everyone knows who you are and everybody's talking about you. Obviously, it's a little bit different switching from politics from the entertainment world. But nevertheless, I was already kind of used to that. Mm-hmm. So that didn't bother me as much as it might some people. My family... Still, you don't receive the negativity, even in wrestling, even if you're a bad guy.
Yeah.
Folks understand the deal, right? In politics, it can be a lot more caustic. And it bothers my wife more than it does me. I'm always like, whatever. Of
course it does.
But yeah. And if you talk to any elected official, I think they're going to tell you the same thing. When it comes to our founding fathers, our system of government, our Constitution, backing up to the 250 years now of America, the Declaration of Independence, that was a really revolution in world thought.
Yeah.
And you had, people like John Locke and others who these ideas were kind of floating out there, but they'd never really been put into practice to the extent that they were by people like Thomas Jefferson and some of our other founding fathers on a philosophical side, and then actually put into practice on a practical side as well. And the result has been breathtaking.
Yeah.
If you think about what the world looked like up until the late 18th century, then what it has looked like since then, it's there. Literally, we could be on two different planets. And a lot of that is because of America and these ideas of liberty. Our Constitution is now the world's oldest written constitution, and it has been copied, at least the concepts have been copied all over the world. So what that tells you is everyone looks to America, and I know that from traveling the world. Even though, obviously we have some flaws, every place does. But when you go other places, America is still that shining beacon of liberty. So for me, the founding fathers set something into motion that literally changed the world. It was a revolution in that everything had, you had authoritarian governments and that was how everything ran. And then all of a sudden you had this clean break to now the philosophy was not that the people were there to serve the king, but the government was there to serve the people.
I love that you talk about how revolutionary this was, because I think sometimes we don't remember that or really realize it. And I'm really happy that we're talking about, as part of our A250 or America's 250 birthday series, we're talking about these concepts and the idea that our rights come from our creator and are not given to us from a king or a government. It was revolutionary. And then the idea of like the pursuit of happiness is was a revolutionary concept. It hadn't really existed, and that people have a right to that. And that, I associate that with the American dream here. Right. And one thing I've been thinking about is how the American dream isn't actually always only for Americans. There's people around the world who want a part of the American dream because it is something that draws people. And I love that you brought up, I was going to ask you about your experience internationally and going around and, meeting people from other cultures and, what America is viewed and means to them. So maybe in that, what did you observe from folks?
A lot of folks around the world realize how much we take what we have here for granted.
Yeah.
And as you said, they want part of that, and they're not allowed. It's prohibited, whether it's actual government policy or it's just de facto how things work. What separates us is, like me, and I started my life basically, and my family had probably been considered lower middle class. Mm-hmm. And then, I just found something I was good at, and man, my life has just changed, and I've been able to put my kids through college, and they're both nurses with advanced degrees and, doing great, and just all the things that the ability for me to take advantage of the gifts that God gave me in a rather niche industry have just been remarkable. When I say that that's only possible in America, you look at the rest of the world, where you're born is where you're going to end up. And you're not going to be able to do anything. You can work as hard as you want. Doesn't matter. Those opportunities are not going to be available. You cannot create them for yourself like you can in this country. And the rest of the world, they look at that and they really think, how is it that Americans cannot realize just what a great deal that is,
right?
And what a unique country this is because of the freedom that we enjoy.
When I wrap the show, we'll see later, I always talk about freedom and liberty and don't take it for granted, is something we always say, because I do think, those who've been born here, grew up here, didn't know anything else, we can really take it for granted.
It's not a criticism, that I say that. It's just people don't know. And I think that someone like me who's had the great opportunity to travel around the world, I've just gotten exposed to those ideas, and that changed how I thought about our country too. Yeah. I was one of those people, America, whatever. And now I'm like, we're awesome. There's stuff that we need to work on.
Sure.
But for the most part, we're awesome. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I do think that we need to work on, and you mentioned that, a lot of times around the world where you are born is what your lot in life. And I think one of the areas that lags in a lot of places in the country is that we do have that in education at times. And Tennessee took a big step passing education savings accounts to really embrace education freedom to give more opportunity to kids. And I know that you're here in Nashville. I think you're at a hearing and lobbying to expand that so more kids can get a great education. Yeah. Can you talk about the effect that you've seen here in Tennessee and in your corner of Tennessee and what you're doing here about it?
Actually, I tell you, when I was younger, I have one brother and one sister. My sister is the most brilliant person academically you could ever meet. She's a rocket scientist. Seriously, I mean, she did. She worked at NASA.
Brains and the brawn, I guess, huh?
Yeah. And then she got a PhD in history and became a history professor. Excelled in school, graduated top of her class, all of those things. My brother had some learning disabilities, really smart. He just didn't, his way of learning did not apply itself to academics necessarily. And he liked to work with his hands. He didn't want to sit in a classroom reading a textbook all day. Fortunately, and it was part of the public school system, but fortunately, we had a tri-county, back then they were called VOTEC schools.
Yeah.
Now they're called CTE. But he was able to study auto mechanics. And because he had that pathway, he's been successful. And I often think if he hadn't been able to do that, if that opportunity hadn't been there for him, he would have been labeled a troublemaker. His life would have turned out completely differently than it did. Then you look at me, and I was the athlete in the family. So all of us have different skills and gifts. And I think it's imperative that we have an education system that does not pigeonhole kids into, okay, this is the only way to be successful. I think school choice is part of that because in Knox County, we have great public schools. We really do. And we've had some innovations over the past several years that we weren't doing before, which has made them even better. But there are still things that for some students, that particular model does not benefit them the most. Right. And I think something that we also, or some folks might discount, is by encouraging competition. Public schools are essentially government monopoly.
Yes.
All right. So by encouraging competition, you actually improve the public schools as well because they have to compete with the private schools and with some of the other things that are the home schools, et cetera, some of the other things that are going on. So it's actually better for the entire education system, and you'll see the criticism is, oh, you're taking money away from public schools. No, we're making public schools better, actually. And we're giving families more ability to choose the best pathway for their young person.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the key is empowering families to make decisions because who knows better and who's more self-interested to make the best decision for that child.
Exactly.
And it really bothers me when adults stand in the way of that, and some of the arguments are so disingenuous. Excuse me, but I'm glad that Tennessee really showed that leadership.
I think it's one of the most important things that we've done, and I think what happens is sometimes people are defending an institution as opposed to what the institution does, and it's really I don't care. I just want young people to get the best possible education so that they have the best chance at life.
So Tennessee's just, over the last few decades has really done some remarkable things. It's become a beacon. Imagine that for other states. I was joking, like I said, that me living in Illinois, a lot of folks that it's an inordinate number of people. I talked to somebody on Saturday night. They're like, oh yeah, well, we're just getting ready to sell our house because we bought down to Tennessee. My in-laws are down there now too. Our daughter's moving down there. I'm like, I have a daughter who lives in Florida. She's like, well, when I get married, we're moving up to Tennessee. I'm like, not Chicago area. She's like, come on, Dad, really? What are other areas? So there's a great race in the nation of different states that love freedom and are trying to do more and more competitive things to make their states at the cutting edge of innovation and free markets. And Tennessee is one of those states. What do you think are the areas that can help carry Tennessee forward as a great state?
For us in East Tennessee, where I live, it's the energy sector. We're the home of nuclear energy, and there's just so much happening around that in our area. One of the most important things, though, is back to education.
Yeah.
It's not only the nuclear engineers and scientists and physicists, but it's also the technicians and even construction, in the skilled trades to build all these things that we're going to need. So that's one of the most important areas for us. AI is another area. Those work for us well because AI requires massive amounts of electricity and nuclear ultimately is, I think, where the country will go to find that. Tennessee has the third lowest state and local tax burden in the country, and that makes an enormous difference when people get to keep their own money, when companies get to keep their money and reinvest. That's huge. So state and local government really does make a big difference. And I think one of the most important things that we have to keep in mind nationally is to allow the states to compete with one another and actually encourage that. And when that happens, when people vote with their feet, again, competition is good for any system. And what'll end up happening is, you'll have winners emerge, and then the folks that aren't doing so well are going to have to change their ways to be able to compete with the winners, the states like Tennessee and frankly, Texas and Florida as well.
Well, I think Tennessee's fortunate to have some strong leadership and folks like you and some of your colleagues. I am excited about what's happening here and some other states around the country. We get to talk to a lot of state leaders who, in fact, we'll do it later tonight even, who are helping pass some of those great policies and shaping the future. And then hopefully we'll trickle them up to the federal level too. So. Yeah,
exactly. Just real quick, for instance, the Department of Education downsizing, ultimately eliminating it's just a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is I call it bureaucratic black hole, because the money which comes from the people in the states, by the way, goes to Washington. Washington keeps most of it, sends some of it back. Well, why don't we just cut out the middleman and just allow the states, to do this? And if the Department of Education has a role, it's much more as information and those sort of things, as opposed to these mandates that come out. And there are a lot of other areas where the federal government just really gets in the way. And instead of sending all that money there to Washington so that they can send it back to us, how about we just keep it here and do the money without paying the bureaucracy?
Well, that's a smart idea. I don't know why we do that. Yeah, no kidding. Well, I'm excited for you. I'm so glad that you've joined us to celebrate America's 250th birthday here, doing it in Nashville, one of the great American cities. I love being able to come here. Walking around last night, it's just a blast, and we're glad that you're all hosting us here, and I'm excited to hear tonight and be with a lot of Tennesseans.
Yep, we're really excited about it as well. And I'd also like to thank AFP for all the great work that they do in our state.
Thanks. It's our pleasure. Hey, if it gets good leaders like you, we're doing pretty well. Well, folks, if you like this episode, please subscribe to our channel, as well as liking and following us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And always remember, freedom and liberty are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.